had a late-night affair with our neighbor after drinks. My husband found out and publicly shamed me. What I did with my neighbor was unfair to my husband and family. I never thought I would be the one to hurt someone I love, but then that happened to be me. It hurts to know that I hurt them. I feel remorse, I feel regret, I feel pain, but I have to live with the decision that I made, even though it's brutally ripping me apart. I know so many questions must be running through your mind. Was I emotionally unsatisfied with him? Did he make me feel unloved? Was my marriage falling apart and that's why I cheated? The truth is no, none of that is true. My husband and I had no real problems. I almost wish I could say he failed me somehow, that he neglected me in some way, but he didn't. There was nothing wrong, and that makes what I did even worse. My husband Jim and I have been married for 17 years now. I'm 36 and he's 39. We have a daughter who is 17 and currently in college. I was pregnant with her before we got married. Technically, we married very young, and while the pregnancy was one reason we tied the knot, we also married because we were deeply in love. We're each other's first love and best friend, which is why we understand each other so well, and together, we've done everything we could to raise our daughter well. Throughout the years, our marriage has been strong and great until now, and I have myself to blame for that, for running something so perfect with one bad decision I couldn't fight or stay away from. 3 years ago, we moved into a new neighborhood. That's when we met our neighbors, a really lovely couple with 2 children, around 6 and 8. From the start, they made the neighborhood feel welcoming, and we got along really well. One day, 2 years ago, I was inside my house reading a book when I heard my neighbor banging hard on my door, calling for my help. I suddenly jumped up and ran to the door and asked him what was wrong. He said he needed help with his daughter and he didn't know what to do. He told me we should hurry, and I ran with him to his house. Getting there, I realized his 6-year-old daughter had spilled hot water on herself and scalded her arm. His wife wasn't home, so he panicked. He didn't know how to safely pour water over her arm without hurting her more. He knew I used to be a nurse before I quit my job, and apparently that made him trust me instantly in a crisis. I grabbed a clean towel and some cold water, and we rushed to the bathroom together. I calmed the little girl down, carefully helped him hold her arm under the running water, and showed him how to apply a cool compress. He kept apologizing, obviously stressed and embarrassed, and I just focused on keeping the little girl calm and safe. After a few tense minutes, her crying eased, the burn was under control, and he finally let out a deep breath and thanked me greatly. Then, as I was about to leave, he asked me to stay for dinner. I declined at first, but he insisted, saying it was his way of thanking me, so I stayed. We all had dinner together with his kids, and it actually felt nice. After dinner, he tucked the kids into bed, and we ended up sitting in the living room talking. Our conversation started with small talk about work, school, and neighborhood stuff, and then it shifted to our partners. He mentioned that his wife was on a work trip, and that's why she was not around. I think we talked for about 2 hours or so because he was fun company, and I guess I was too, so we didn't even notice how much time had passed. It was when I suddenly checked the time and remembered my husband would be coming home soon, since he was working late, that I had to put an end to our conversation, and we bid each other goodnight. I needed to go make food so my husband could eat before going to bed. Anyways, that's how my neighbor and I became close and overly friendly with each other. I think Jim noticed, and he casually asked me what was going on and what changed because we seemed to be closer, saying he'd seen us talking a lot more and laughing together in the yard, and he felt like he had missed out on something. I laughed and told him about the incident with his daughter and how I stepped in to help. That's how we somewhat became more friends than neighbors, and my husband Jim seemed to not have a problem with it. Steve was a great guy and neighbor, and everyone knew it. Honestly, I liked having someone to talk to when Jim was busy or working late. Then I started dreaming about Steve. I don't know why. I think I developed a crush on him the way he paid me attention, and complimented me made me feel really close to him. I was a bit of envious of his wife as well. I was having messy, intimate fantasies about him, and I hated it so much because I wanted to have them with my husband. I tried my best to channel that energy into my marriage and bring it to life with Jim, but that didn't stop me from having those dreams. I knew it was because of a physical attraction. I don't know why I was attracted to Steve, but I know that when we started being close, I started noticing how handsome he was, and when he accidentally touched my body, it kind of awakened something. I hated feeling that way about another man, especially a married man, and to think that I was married made me feel even worse. It was so bad to the point that when I had sex with Jim, I was imagining Steve. I was almost caught one night while we were at it because I almost moaned Steve's name, and immediately after I realized it, I shut it down completely. I was relieved that Jim didn't notice because he was so wrapped up in the moment, and I had to tell myself to get a grip before I made a mistake I couldn't take back. This feeling was so strange because it had never happened to me before. I had never been physically attracted to anyone except Jim, and I never thought I would be, so why now? Why Steve? I asked myself that question over and over until I felt like I was breaking apart just trying to figure it out, so I decided to keep my distance from him. I became super busy, so we never accidentally crossed paths for weeks, and I hoped that this conscious and intentional act would help clear out all those unwelcome fantasies, but it didn't. It just made me miss him more. I wanted to talk to Jim about it, but I didn't know how he would take it. Before I could even say anything to him, the voices in my head had already discouraged me, saying that it would end badly if I said a word, so I didn't. I just kept it to myself. Trust me, this was tormenting. At one point, I even went out and bought a vibrator, which was something I'd never done before. I had to because I was just trying any means to get those feelings out of my system without actually doing anything I'd regret. Nothing was wrong with my marriage. Nothing was wrong with Jim. Was it because Steve was smoking hot? But I had met a lot of smoking hot guys, and I had never felt this way, so what changed? Then, a thought formed in my head that maybe this whole thing wasn't even about Steve at all. Maybe it was more about me, that my adult life was changing somehow, and this was my way of figuring it out. I used the vibrator only when my husband was working late while fantasizing about Steve and the things I wanted him to do to me. Most times, when I saw him outside and he smiled at me or waved warmly or made small talk, I asked myself if he actually saw me the same way, or if it was just me who was having these thoughts about him. But I was not going to ask a married man such a question, so I just tried to ignore it. About a month ago, his kids had gone to stay with their aunt for the weekend, and his wife was out of town for work again, and Jim was working late. I had just finished dinner by myself when there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, it was Steve. He asked if he needed some company, and he said his house was quiet, and he just wanted to talk before he went to bed. He asked if my husband was around so that he could join us too, and I told him no, that Jim was working late that night. I told him to give me a minute and that I'd come over soon, that I just needed to tidy up something. He said okay and left, and he added that there was no need to bother if I was busy, so I told him that it was not a problem. I didn't care about how I felt about him. I knew I had it under control. I mean, we'd done this before, just sitting around talking, and nothing happened. So I went when I was done freshening up and cleaning the mess I had made. We ended up sitting in his living room, drinking and talking about everything and nothing. He told me how stressed he'd been at work, and how much harder it felt to parent alone when his wife was gone, and how lonely the house could get. I admitted that I felt the same when Jim worked late, that sometimes I missed having an adult to just talk to at night. Then we laughed about dumb little things, about how fast the kids were growing, and about how we felt old now compared to when we first got married. The conversation went on, and I noticed myself noticing him, the way he smiled when he talked about the kids, and the sound of his voice when he laughed. I felt a pull toward him I couldn't control. I tried to fight it, but I couldn't, and I think the alcohol had something to do with it because normally I could keep it under control, so I just kissed him. I saw his eyes widen, then we both said at once that we shouldn't be doing this, but we didn't stop. We went further, and we had sex, and I woke up the next morning naked and wrapped around his body, and I shouted as I realized what had happened. Then he woke up too and immediately regretted it. He told me he was sorry for what happened, saying we had sex because we were both drunk, and he was panicking and acting so scared. I didn't understand what was happening, but I understood one thing. He didn't feel the same way I did, or he was just pretending because he didn't want this to affect his marriage. So I told him that I was sorry too, and that as long as we didn't share it with anyone, we could pretend it never happened, and he said thank you, and was suddenly acting calm. So that only meant that I was right all along. So I quickly left, and I was also feeling guilty too, but I think I handled it better than he did. Early that morning, as I was leaving his house and heading to my house, I was thinking of what excuse I'd tell Jim for not being around. But luckily, and scarily for me, as I was reaching the front door, I heard a car pull into the driveway and saw Jim getting out. My heart sank. I tried to act normal and calm, but I was scrambling inside. I welcomed him, and I quickly went inside, pretending I was just out for some fresh air. Then he asked what I was doing up so early. I just said I couldn't sleep, so I sat outside for a bit and had a drink. He said okay, and then he just looked at me for a second before he went inside the room. I rushed straight to the bathroom to wash up because I knew I still smelled like alcohol and sex, and the last thing I wanted was for him to start asking more questions. My heart was beating fast the whole time. When I came out, although he was tired, he put me on his lap and apologized for not being able to come home last night due to some work emergencies, and he said he would be working late for the week, but he would make it up to me once the hectic period was over. I told him it was okay and that I'd hold him to that. Then he laughed and said no problem. Jim is the sweetest man I know, and that made me feel worse about what transpired between Steve and me. The funny and weird thing was the next night, Steve texted me. He had never texted me before. We didn't have a reason to text then, so apparently he got my number from our group chat and messaged me directly, still apologizing about last night and saying we should never drink too much again when we are together. I told him to move on and that I had, and he replied with a sad emoji. To me, that meant that he enjoyed what happened last night, and since he confirmed that it would remain our secret, that meant we could go at it again. But I was not ready. I never wanted to betray Jim again. I told myself I would be fantasizing over him instead, since I was getting horny as he was texting me. I thought that, with the way he behaved that morning, it was enough to get over him. But I guess my body wanted what it wanted. But this time, I made sure it was my vibrator and not Steve inside of me. I forgot to add, strangely during the afternoon as I was going through my phone, I saw the sex video of us from last night, and I got wet watching it. I didn't even know I had recorded it, and I guess I did it to watch later in a drunken state given how I was feeling, because I would never do that with a sane mind. So I played the video while using the vibrator and moaning loudly. It was at night, and Jim was not coming back anytime soon, so I was safe and could be as loud as I wanted. I was nearly at orgasm, moaning and screaming Steve's name aloud when I heard someone clap and say, "This is very interesting." Since I recognized the voice, I quickly cowered in shame. I couldn't face him. Jim had just walked in on me doing that dirty act. I quickly tried to grab my phone as well, but he grabbed it before me. Then he smiled at me and asked if it was fun doing this behind his back, and I said I was sorry. Then he said there was no need to be sorry, and that he understood me properly, that I had just been bored and lonely, especially with him working all day and night, so it was fine, and he had no problem with it. He even said that if anything, he was leaving the room so I could continue. I was just confused, but still, I cried and begged him, saying it was no fun and that it was just a one-time thing that happened after a late-night drink, and that I was truly sorry, but he said there was no need and that I should just keep going and that he had work to do. After that, he left the house. I couldn't even continue. I was shaken by Jim's behavior. I didn't even know what to make of it. I just kept crying and texting him about how sorry I was. Then I deleted the video and threw away the vibrator. Jim returned in the morning. I barely slept, and I was happy to have him home, despite him acting strange. He told me that some of his friends were coming over in the evening, and I was like, okay, no problem. Everything was a bit awkward that day. Jim acted so calm, and that scared me. In that moment, I didn't know what to do. I had always thought Jim would freak out if any man came close to me, but instead he was acting too chill, and somehow that killed me even more. That evening, when his friends came over, I was shocked to realize they were just all our neighbors packed in our house. I called him aside and asked what was going on, and that he said friends, not neighbors, but he responded that his neighbors were also his friends, and asked if I had a problem with that. I wanted to yell at him, but I couldn't, not after everything. Then Steve came with his wife. I was shocked to see her there in the flesh. Jim casually informed me that she had come back that morning, and suddenly I was walking on eggshells around her. I don't even know why, but I felt so heavily guilty for sleeping with her husband, especially given how friendly and warm she was toward me. Then, as everyone was eating and laughing and thanking Jim for inviting them over, he suddenly called me out and said I had an announcement to make. I was shocked. We didn't discuss anything, so why would I have an announcement to make? I was oblivious to his plans. Everyone cheered for me, and I went straight to Jim and whispered in his ear, asking him what was happening. He said that I owe it to myself to be honest. He said I should tell everyone what he witnessed last night, and when I was done, I should share the video to the group chat. I started shaking and wondered why Jim could be that cruel. Then he shouted loudly, "Go on, we are all waiting." And I turned. Then I said no, I couldn't do it. He looked at me and said I would suffer even worse if I didn't. I told him I didn't have the video and that we could settle privately. He said that he knew I would delete it, and that's why he sent it to himself before I did, and that I should check my WhatsApp, that he just dropped it for me. My knees gave out. At that point, everyone was confused, but judging from the look on their faces, they were all expecting good news, and I felt like dying knowing how I would disappoint and break people just by doing this, but I didn't have a choice. I was pressured and forced, so I started crying before finally confessing that I had slept with Steve. But it was not intentional. With my hands shaking, I shared the video to the group chat. Steve's wife lunged at me, screaming and crying, asking why I would come between her and her husband. She even spat in my face. Our neighbors rushed in to pull us apart, and in the chaos, she turned and slapped her husband before running off. Everyone just stood there, talking about how they couldn't believe what had just happened. Then, Jim stopped Steve from leaving the room and told him congratulations, that he just married himself a second wife. Then, he asked him to grab my things and take them to his house, and said he hopes his wife will welcome us both. Steve's face fell, and I could see he was struggling with shame, but I couldn't help either because I was struggling with shame. All I did was cry and regret everything. Everyone in my neighborhood is talking about me even till now, and Jim actually took my stuff outside and said I should move in with Steve. I have begged and said everything, but he said he is just supporting my cause and that he sees nothing wrong with that. So I just left, and currently I'm in a motel, thinking of how I would manage the whole situation and the humiliation I'm currently facing. I am paralyzed by shame and regret, and I'm unable to contact anyone or decide what to do. I'm also running low on money, and I fear my daughter will hate me when she finds out. I have called and texted Steve to check on him, also because he didn't even know about the video, so I feel like a villain. But he's been avoiding me and ignoring my calls and messages. I think he has blocked me. I know he's also dealing with the fallout, and I heard his wife has left him, and his reputation is in tatters. And now I feel shitty for breaking two homes apart. They say the truth sets you free, but my truth destroyed families. Update. Things haven't been easy, not to exaggerate, but I think walking on hot coal would have been a lot easier than what I'm going through. I'm suffering emotionally and physically, and I'm scared that I will break down anytime soon. 2 days ago, I didn't have any other choice. I was desperate to make things right, and I had no choice but to go back to Jim, although I was the last person he wanted to see. When I got there, he told me that I was not welcome there, and asked if I had forgotten the direction to my new home. I begged him, telling him that I never meant to do it, and it was the effect of the alcohol, but he said that the effect should also be able to push me to handle the aftermath of my actions. I don't know why, but I think my repentance and contrition were a joke to him. He clearly was not taking me seriously, and if anything, he found me amusing. I couldn't believe I had become a joke to Jim, and I had no value in his life anymore, and that hurt me more than anything. As I was outside pleading for a second chance, my daughter came home from college unexpectedly. I think she had heard from a neighbor what happened, and she just gave me a look of hate and asked me why. I tried to explain, but nothing sounded like enough. She said that I had chosen my side, and it was not with her and her father. So clearly she didn't want to see me anymore, and then she went inside. I broke down in tears, and that made Jim even happier. He repeated what our daughter said and added that he would have the divorce papers delivered. Then he told me never to dare think that he would ever forgive me for being so selfish. Then he shut his door. I sat down on the floor crying. I didn't even care that the neighbors or anyone passing by were muttering mocking words. I just needed my family back, but they clearly don't need me anymore, and since I realized that, I have not known peace. My soul has been troubled, and I hope that I can live with the consequences of my actions.